Welcome to another episode of Electable. I'm Deb Chubb. And and we are sponsored by the Indiana Women's Action Movement. Please visit our website, indianawam.org, and see what you can do to help us in our mission to inform the public about interesting and important issues facing Hoosiers. Today, we have one of the most important issues that we need to talk about. And so with me today is Denise Koebcke. She's the new executive director at the Caring Place, a domestic violence shelter and services in Porter County in Valparaiso. So welcome, Denise. Thank you for joining me.
Oh, thanks, Deb. Our theme is Let's Start Talking. So I really appreciate you bringing me on to talk about this important issue.
Absolutely. And just as a testament to the fact that nobody talks about the issue of domestic violence, is that when I looked to see if there were any bills pertaining to domestic violence in the state legislature this session, there were zero, nothing that I could find. So interesting. It does seem to be the topic that no one wants to talk about. So we're going to talk about it.
Fantastic.
So Denise, I know you're somewhat new in your position, but tell us what's happening in this area that is Porter County and the region in terms of domestic violence. What's going on?
Sure. I am new in this position of president and CEO. I've been here a full year now with the Caring Place, but prior to that, I worked for the Caring Place on the side. So I worked full-time in education. You and I have an education background in common, and it was just such an important topic that I started working with Caring Place as a volunteer on the side. So I was working full-time in education, joined the Caring Place to help them create a bullying prevention program back in the day. It was called NBA, and they had sponsored that. And then when Amanda Bach was killed locally, they called me and asked me to be on a youth dating violence prevention task force. And so I volunteered to do that, and then quickly realized we needed a youth task force on dating violence because, we old folks have no clue what the new dating culture is like.
Right. So tell me about Amanda Bach. I'm not familiar with
Amanda Bach. Amanda Bach had graduated high school, was murdered in Wheeler area by an ex-boyfriend. So that was about 10 years ago now. It's been a decade. Wonderful young woman. And that's what drew me to volunteer to be on that task force, because as a mother, I have a son, I have a daughter, and it was such a horrific awakening to understand that can happen right here in Porter County. And it can be your child, it could be my child, it can be your neighbor's family. So I really connected with the parents' grief over that as well and wanted to do something. So that's how I started working with the Caring Place on youth dating violence prevention. So I became their youth outreach coordinator, created the Amanda Forum, which utilizes a youth leadership kind of peer mentoring sort of strategy to get the word out about dating violence and healthy relationships. We can't just keep teaching people what not to do or hounding them to not do things. We have to give people the alternatives. We have to teach people how to have healthy relationships. So that's something in addition to our crisis intervention. As you know, the Caring Place is a 24-hour free emergency crisis center. In addition to that, over the past year, we are really pushing forward, trying to expand our outreach, our prevention and awareness programming, thus the Let's Start Talking. You can't solve an issue, you can't have an impact on an issue if you're not willing to talk about it honestly.
So tell me, how are you reaching young people? I mean, I guess I'm a little concerned because I see so much happening at the state legislature that's limiting education among young people. And so I'm wondering, how are you able to reach young people?
So the pandemic has definitely made that far more difficult over the past couple of years. Prior to the pandemic, we were working with high school youth and created a youth task force from across the county, across the region. We would meet monthly and discuss these issues, utilize social media to spread the word. We created all sorts of great resources. One of them is Breaking Up is Hard to Do. That's our most popular one. That people need to know how to end a relationship respectfully, and those sorts of things. And all of those resources were created with that youth voice. Then they would go out and work with other teenagers. We did a region-wide conference, full day conference called Dare to Date Safe on dating violence with schools across the entire region. We had another one of those scheduled for next month, February, but we've had to postpone it until spring. So in May, we will, hopefully the surge will be over and we'll be able to reinstitute that region-wide conference of hundreds of kids. And we are now using Amanda Forum. We had to pivot and utilize college students as our leadership team, our young adult leadership team, because it was really hard to get teenagers out of high school. And, with the pandemic and all that sort of thing, even volunteers weren't allowed to come in. So that has been a great move. I think we are rolling more into the college campuses, and it's 16 to 24-year-olds are the most impacted by dating violence and domestic violence. So it makes a lot of sense, our college kids and working with our youth. But what we have seen over the past year is just a huge increase in children in shelter with their parent, primarily women and children, but we also can serve, all demographics. We've had men, we've had elderly, we've had LGBTQ+, our new campus is accessible to all of, a broad range of demographic. But in domestic violence situations, it's the hardest for women with children to leave. What keeps them, you had asked, what keeps them there? What keeps them there?
Why is it so difficult for women to get out of those situations?
Right. And for women with children, it's incredibly difficult because oftentimes they don't even have a bank account sometimes, and then you've got your children. So why does anybody stay in an unhappy marriage, right? Whether or not it's an abusive situation, people stay because you worry about your children. You're going to change their entire lifestyle. Where are you going to live? And in an abusive situation, there's so much danger going to live with a friend or with a family member. So that's why domestic violence shelters are so incredibly important, because it can de-escalate the family violence by getting people out of that crisis situation into a neutral location, and then you're not endangering other friends or other family, because that's one hold, that is utilized to keep people in an unhealthy situation.
So, yeah, I remember when I was practicing law, I did a lot of family law, and I knew that that was the most dangerous time when a husband was going to be served with a petition for dissolution. That 24-hour period after that was the most dangerous time for women.
It very much is.
Yeah, we really had to make sure that she was in a safe place and she was protected during that time. So, so fear of that situation, fear of upsetting a partner so much that they, might be violent, I'm sure keeps women from pursuing any separation.
Absolutely. And then with children as well, it's just a lot harder logistically to get a family of 4, out, and to get transportation and to get everybody packed up and do that in such a way that you're not tipping off the abuser, so you get them out. We get people in the middle of the night with just the clothes on their back. And in one night over the holidays, we had 9 people in one evening representing 4 different family units, 4 adults and 5 children, and we're a 24-hour shelter. We provide everything free, and if they can get to us, we'll take them in. But we are full, we are full. And so my point is that if if women with children are getting out at these higher rates and we're seeing many more children, it just tells you how escalated the violence is becoming, because, they'll stay longer than anybody else generally.
Right. And so how much a difference have you seen during the pandemic in the number of women?
Difference. I've looked back over the data from 4 or 5 years worth of data, and we are serving more domestic violence survivors now this year, the last few months, than we have in years. All the data that I can see. 6 times as many as we had several years ago. So we just have so many people needing help, and we have 12 bedrooms.
And how long can families stay at your facility?
As long as it takes. We don't say, hey, your time's up, you've got to leave. The goal is to empower people to move forward in healthy ways. So our advocates do an amazing job connecting people to resources. And, we have even purchased plane tickets and have flown people, out of the area back to a support network, because oftentimes survivors of abuse have been isolated from family.
Right. And that's pretty key, isn't it? That's typical.
Typical.
That's part of the cycle is to become more and more isolated, to be, to have your violent abuser remove you from your support systems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a strategy that's utilized, I'd say, in pretty much every case I've ever seen, And what we're seeing during the pandemic is that people are staying with us longer because there's nowhere to go, and housing, transitional housing, affordable housing, all of those things roll into an ability of someone to get out of that situation. Because if there's nowhere else to go, they cannot find an apartment that they can afford, they're likely to go back. And the average is 7 times someone will try to leave and go back. So,
wow. So, tell me, if there, how can we fix this? What is your wish to change this situation?
Oh gosh. I have so many wishes. That's a big, big question. But, our 2 main goals, let's focus on our mission. So our main goal is, number 1, to provide emergency crisis intervention, so the shelter, emergency crisis shelter. So we need the space, we need the funding to staff 24-hour emergency shelter. Okay. And the more people we have coming in, the more staff we need, because it's not safe to have 1 person there and 50 people in shelter. We need, there are lots of medical considerations, and of course the abuser alerts and that sort of stuff. So that's one end. My wish is that we continue to get the support and more local support to be able to provide all of those services. As staffing anything right now is costing far, far more than ever before. And we can't just close our doors if we don't have staff. We can't just raise our prices, to offset what we have to pay staff. We're a nonprofit. So that is, the funding is huge. We need money and we need that support. Secondly, we have got to increase our upstream prevention. Okay. We're not satisfied just providing the intervention. We want to go upstream, figure out what's going wrong and how we can impact that positively to circumvent that violence in the first place, right? So we've got to do the upstream prevention. That requires more programming and more staffing and more partnerships. And we're really excited about some partnerships that we've formed already with, Ivy Tech and doing our Amanda Forum programming and getting out there and educating emergency room personnel and police officers. We helped form a Porter County strangulation response team for the first time in history. LaPorte has had a strangulation response team. Lake County has had a strangulation response team, and now Porter County does. We spearheaded that effort.
Explain that. I'm not sure what that is.
Okay, a strangulation response team, the state was offering training for that, but you had to put together a collaborative group. So we pulled in the Porter County Sheriff's Department and the Porter County attorney's office and Northwest Health. We have a SANE sexual assault nurse examiner coordinator on our team. And then 3 of our staff members, our advocates and our director of client services. Strangulation is the go-to when, when violence against women, strangulation is a key component of that. And it's a huge red flag for sexual assault, domestic violence, because it's used so often. So the strangulation response teams train this team who is then meeting. In fact, I think they're meeting next week here at our advocacy center to start talking and training law enforcement, medical personnel to see these red flags of strangulation so that these people who are experiencing that can get more help. It's a tricky thing. It's hard to identify sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why that's important, the strangulation response team. And we're going to meet quarterly to try and get that word out and get that education out around the county.
Well, that is interesting. I mean, I didn't know that as a, that is always kind of an element of domestic violence. So
not always, but it often is. And we see it here often. And if you would think about the ongoing health problems caused by that kind of continuous abuse, you're talking about your neck, your head, that it's such a sensitive area, and then the health problems that are exacerbated by that when it's an ongoing attack strategy, they're huge.
So the hope is to identify women who are suffering from this kind of abuse in particular. And are there certain signs? I mean, are you just looking for physical marks?
It was a very long training. It was a month long of full day Fridays of training for our strangulation response team. I personally did not attend, but the strangulation response team, our advocates and the law enforcement, they were taught all of those signs to go on out into the community and spread that word.
Interesting.
Deaths in Indiana from domestic violence have risen. So from July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2021, ICADV recorded 98 deaths, domestic violence deaths attributed to domestic violence. And that's 181% more than the year before. And those are just the ones that were found to be attributed to domestic violence. And in cases such as strangulation, so many other things, sometimes they're not even, there are far more deaths that are domestic violence that aren't actually attributed to domestic violence.
Right. So almost double.
Oh, yeah.
Almost double from the year before.
In one year.
Wow. And were domestic violence shelters eligible for, the American Rescue Plan funding and the CARES Act funding?
Yes. In fact, that's one of the things I'm most proud of. The 2021 FIPS the ARP funding, we wrote in a request for a children's services specialist. So we did not have children's advocates on staff and hadn't for years. So I wrote a 2-year grant for a children's services specialist, which focused specifically on our children in shelter and their parents, and partnered with SAMHSA recognized best practice in suicide prevention, substance abuse prevention, violence prevention, sources of strength. So we are partnering with Sources of Strength to bring that curriculum into our staff. We did a staff retreat because Sources of Strength is about, it's a wellness program. It's best practice, protective factors focused on hope, help, and strength. Okay, for everybody, adults, children, and then we're using that with our children and their parents to teach those healthier habits. Developing hope, developing strengths. It's strength-based.
Wow. Well, that's really great. And so I assume that you were considered essential workers and were eligible for the PPP, the payroll protection plan funding. So, well, that's excellent. That's excellent that you were in that. And so you'll be getting some new funds from the new ARP grants?
We
And
hope
from-
so. None of that's a given.
I
We
see.
just submitted a grant for that. And I'm glad you bring that up. So our fingers are crossed that we'll get some 2022 specifically from the ICJI portion of that. But
that's
the thing
the
about all these state
Indiana Criminal
grants,
Justice Institute. You do a lot
yes,
of, you do a lot of
Indiana
acronyms, so I
Criminal
like to-
Justice Institute,
Yeah.
yes. It's alphabet soup around here. There's so many.
Yeah.
That was a big eye opener when I came in the first year. But what people I think don't realize about small nonprofits like us, like the Caring Place, is that we have no local government funding. We are not affiliated with DCS and funded by that, or the Department of Children's Services or anything like that. So we don't get any baseline funding from anywhere. We earn every single penny through writing some grants through, ICJI, Indiana Criminal Justice Institute. And that's about, if we get them, so we're not guaranteed those. If we get them, that's about 25 to 30% of our budget, okay? That money is reimbursement based. So in order to even apply for those grants, you have to have the cash flow to be able to pay for your staff, your staffing and all of those things prior to getting reimbursed, which could be 6 months even sometimes, or longer. So that is one piece of our funding, but everything else that we get is through private donors and local foundations and, corporate sponsors who
Well,
support
and the amount
us.
of work and time that takes to raise
Exactly.
funds is,
And we're a very small staff.
yeah.
So we all wear a lot of hats and are working a lot of hours bringing in that funding.
Is there funding available through HUD, Housing and Urban Development? I mean, this is, to some extent, a real housing issue.
It is a housing issue, but we don't mission creep into that, that housing area. Our mission is domestic violence, but we do partner with, say, housing opportunities and work with them. And sometimes they channel some of that our way when they can. Medical partnerships, HealthLink has been incredible. I don't know what we would have done without, or what we would do right now without HealthLink, because they, make sure we get tests and they make sure that we have access to vaccinations and if we have medical issues, which we often do with residents due to the nature of why they're with us, we go to HealthLink. They're fantastic.
Wow. And so, I know here in LaPorte County, a nonprofit, the Stepping Stone, does, the same work. And they were able many years ago now to build a longer term traditional housing facility where people can stay up to 2 years. And I think that has been, just enormously helpful for women to, not have to, go right out there. And I know you say they can stay as long as they need to, but I can't, but I assume that 2 years is too long.
Rare, right? That's because we are an emergency crisis center. So we are working to remove people from the peak of the lethality. Okay. Right. And then empower them to be able to move forward and transition or get out of the area, find a new job, move to their own apartment, that sort of thing.
And how long, what's the average length of the stay?
The average is about 30 days.
Yeah.
It's about 30 days, but some will come in and leave right away the next day. Some will be here 6 months, 9 months.
Oh, wow.
It just depends.
So, yeah. I would think, particularly with kids, it would take a long time to, establish credit, to get a job, to find childcare, all of those things.
And our advocates do a wonderful job of linking them to those resources, but you can only link them to what's available. So, if there aren't apartments available, it's pretty difficult. So all of these different social issues and public health issues are all intertwined. The two biggest problems in Porter County for law enforcement are drugs and domestic violence. So if we want to create a better culture and climate in Porter County, we have to address those two big issues, drugs and domestic violence. they're just all intertwined. And that's why we work to form so many different partnerships across nonprofits. I'm a real collaborator. I feel we're a lot stronger together. So working with, Family Focus, who comes in and provides therapists for our clients, and, working with DCS, and we provide that avenue for people to come in and meet with their attorneys and talking to the different housing activists, who are building housing and affordable housing, and all of those sorts of things are intertwined.
They are. Everything is connected, isn't it?
It is. It is. Which is why upstream prevention is so important in getting out there and teaching healthy relationships and taking away the stigma of seeking help. Why do people stay? Why don't people talk about it? Because of the stigma. Survivors of domestic violence in a survey, a statewide survey that was done just a couple years ago, said that they really feel they can't win because they get judged for staying, they get judged for leaving, and there's just the stigma is intense. So people don't talk about it.
Man, this is just, this is one of the toughest issues out there. And I'm sure it's just really just so difficult to watch women and children, families, who get away and then end up going back. And you can see why. I mean, there's all kinds of, reasons. I mean, just the lack of resources, the lack of a car, the lack of a job, the lack of childcare, the lack of housing. It's overwhelming. I'm sure it's just overwhelming for women trying to get out of that situation.
It is. And there are so many barriers stacked up against them. It's, when Made, I don't know if you read the book Made or saw the series Made, but I have to tell you, after that came out, we had many more calls and we had some new donors because they said, I never realized, just how difficult it was for somebody to get out of a situation like that. And you take 2 steps ahead and then you get knocked back down, 10 steps. And the system is just so difficult to maneuver. You have to have a job to get the childcare, but you can't get childcare because you don't have the job, and all of those things. And that's very real. That is truly, absolutely what our people face every day.
Wow. And so, is there any work going on as far as prosecution of, domestic violence offenders?
Sure. Our advocates have done a huge number of protective orders over the past year. So protective orders and lots of assistance with child custody and those sorts of things. We work really closely with the Porter County Sheriff's Department and the Valparaiso Police Department, who just hired a social worker, which is great news. We work really closely with them, and it's intertwined. Oftentimes we'll get the police officers who respond to these situations will transport women and children to us themselves. I think maybe people don't realize how closely we work together and how grateful we are for our local police departments. They do so much to help us because they know how badly we're needed in a community. If we can provide a safe space for people, it makes every other part of the community safer. If domestic violence doesn't stay contained, to just that family, it oozes out. We had Annie Nicholson, who was killed years ago in the grocery store parking lot by an ex-husband, and her brother is now on our board. I think
Nice.
I think it's such a difficult topic. I often tell my staff, we're just not a warm, fuzzy nonprofit. We can't put pictures of our kids out there. If we could, but we can't do that. It's a private thing. And so we're not warm, fuzzy in that way because it's an issue that hits home for so many people. The vast majority of us have some have been impacted by domestic violence in some way, whether it's an aunt or, a past dating relationship that you had, or it's a neighbor, or it's your child's friend, and his family. If you really talk to people and you really stop to think about it, pretty much everybody has some story, has been impacted in some way by domestic violence situations.
Yeah, this is just, it's just so hard. And so, and I know that in cases where the woman is dependent financially on their domestic partner, they often oppose having that partner arrested and put in jail because that will interfere with the financial sustainability of the family. So then you've got someone who's, doing this and there's no consequences.
Yeah, it is. It's a really sticky situation in so many ways, because in that same survey I mentioned before of survivors of domestic violence, one of the things they said that they needed most, besides the less stigma, less judgment from the rest of society, was more assistance for the abuser and their spouses, or intimate partners, that they feel there's a great need for more help for the abuser as well.
And any idea like what that means? What kind of help are we talking about? So I guess we're talking about counseling and anger management,
counseling. And oftentimes so many of these things, again, are intertwined. It's when he drinks, or when she drinks. And it's really important to remember that this is not just a male issue. This is male and female issues. There's same-sex domestic violence going on. There's, women. I've had, from an education background, I know of multiple students, male students, who were nearly killed by an abusive female partner. So I think that whole demographic thing was a big awakening for me. And I think so many people believe it's a certain type of demographic, it's a certain type of person that experiences domestic violence. And I can tell you here right now that it is every demographic, across all demographics and socioeconomic statuses and employment. There are professionals who are experiencing this. There are, blue collar, there are professionals. It's just every demographic that you can think of.
Oh my gosh. So, okay. So tell us what we can do to help you.
Oh, what you can do. I took some notes on this for sure. So I didn't want to forget. So first thing, and whether it's to the Caring Place or your local domestic violence organization, donate. We do need things, but primarily we need money, because during this time period, this pandemic time period, staffing is so much more expensive, and we're locked into like 2-year grants that only pay a portion of some staff members, and that won't change for a while. So staffing costs have increased, 24-hour staffing costs, during a workforce time period where it's hard for corporate America to hire people. It's even harder for nonprofits to hire people. We can't compete with corporate, rates and pay scales, that sort of thing. Maintenance, upkeep, the sheer numbers of people we have coming and going. And remember, we provide everything, food and, and clothing and winter boots and, birthday parties and all of those things. We provide all of that stuff. So when those things get more expensive in the economy, it's costing us more as well. Learn. Start talking. That's why last year our theme was Let's Start Talking. And we went around and facilitated conversations like this about domestic violence and sexual assault and healthy relationships and all of those things. And in 2022, our theme is Let's Start Talking, filling the gaps, because there are so many gaps in outreach and prevention awareness and in funding, of course. So start talking and learning about this issue. So if you're still listening to us, thank you. And then spread the word among your village. Each of you can help this issue by spreading the word and helping educate your own small village of human beings. Talk about healthy relationship skills with your kids, with your friends. It's not okay to just say, hey, don't date that guy, that there's red flags, that's bad news. How do you create a healthy relationship? We all need to start talking about that. What do you deserve? What does a healthy relationship look like? And encourage help seeking and don't judge. No one's going to open up to you or ask for help or be honest with you if they feel judged. So, encourage people to seek help and don't judge their motivations, because if you were in that situation, you might be doing the same thing.
Yes, very difficult to second guess those decisions. It
Yeah.
really is, even
Yeah.
though you want to, I mean, I know everyone is tempted to say, why would you go back? But
Oh, I
there's
know.
lots of very legitimate reasons.
Very legitimate and socioeconomic reasons. And,
Right.
when children are involved, it just complicates everything that much more. And when you have no family support, if the family culture has been that women are to be submissive or, subjugated, that's something. How do you break away from that if you don't have even family support for getting out of that situation?
Right. And, I have known women who have been in abusive relationships and have gotten out, but years later are still being, kind of yanked around through financial kind of abuse. And so it's really upsetting that after, this woman left, took the kids, found a place, got the divorce, and ended up probably not doing as well as she could have financially through the divorce just to get out. Because that's often, I knew that when I was practicing family law and did a lot of divorce, I had to tell women that oftentimes men see the children, like custody, visitation, all of that, as just one more item in the marital asset. Where women see that as, oh, no, that's separate.
Right.
That's separate from the property and the house and all of that. And so you have to get your, you have to get your head around how other people see it. And often children are used in the divorce to entice the woman to give up other financial property, things like that. And that's just really frustrating. But yeah, and even someone who goes through all that gives up some financial security just to get out and to bring the kids because she's worried about the safety of the kids.
Right.
And then years later is still being, just yanked around by, someone, they have convinced to, no, you keep the house and I'll pay the mortgage for you. Well, then what happens? Then you're constantly monthly wondering if the mortgage got paid, and if it doesn't, what, you're the one who's going to suffer. So,
Absolutely.
so it's really, it can just be a lifelong struggle for some women. And so
It is. And there are women, who have lived in a situation like that for decades and have never had their own bank account. So
right.
how do you separate and create a credit history? There are banks that won't even let them open a
right.
bank account even when they escape, because there's just nothing. I have to say, Centir Bank works with us, partners with us in ways to help women like that. We know that we can call them if we have a situation like that, and they'll work with us to try and find a way to help that woman create that bank account and that sort of thing. So,
right. Yeah. The implications, I mean, they're just endless. I mean, you can't get a credit card,
right.
or you can't get utilities turned on in your name.
And how do you
because
run an apartment then?
Yeah, right.
You can't,
So,
you have to have, they do credit checks for everything. How do you buy a car? How do you,
right.
How do you rent a car? You can't rent a car either,
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
And that, that kind of disability, just so cripples women. And so you can absolutely see why they end up going back many times. So, okay. So tell us more. Tell us where people can send you money. Where should they send it? And how can they reach you and provide you with all of the things that you need?
Sure. You can go to our website. So our website is www.thecaringplacenwi.org, or just Google us and we will come up via Google. We have a Facebook page and there's a donate button. You can do that. We also have, I need to share the crisis number because someone listening right now may need some advocacy. And it's important for you to know that this crisis number that I'm going to share isn't just if you're coming to live in the shelter. You know, the vast majority of people don't ever seek shelter, but you might need some advocacy and some support for filing a protective order, or just someone to talk to, or maybe you're already out of that situation, but you need someone to help you through those next steps. So our shelter number is 219-464-2128. And you can call there, and you know, we have community clients. So it's not just our folks in shelter that we assist. We assist hundreds of community clients as well who never actually come into shelter.
So you can help with referrals for affordable attorney services, perhaps?
We can link them or help them find other resources. So, you know, we can help walk them through 211 or get them connected with United Way or get them connected with Porter Stark, or, you know, all of those different avenues of seeking help depending on what they need.
That's great. That's great. Well, and hopefully those services are, you know, useful and available and funded, and can help women, you know, get away from that violence.
And again, you know, men, we can take in men. We've had young men. I think oftentimes people focus on domestic violence being intimate partner violence, but that's not always it. Now we have so many more elderly and, you know, families living in extended family situations. And I think the CDC numbers were something like 1 in 7 folks above the age of 60 living at home with extended family were facing elder abuse, you know, so that's a form of domestic violence. Sometimes young people are living with parents or in-laws, and there's abuse going on in that way. You know, sometimes for our LGBTQ community, that happens, you know, living at home, but facing abuse from family members, not from an intimate partner. You know, so there are lots of variations. So don't think that it only has to be intimate partner violence. We help in all areas of domestic violence.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I had not realized that expanded definition. Wow, that's incredible. Okay, all right. Well, our time is up, but thank you so much for talking with me, getting this out. I learned a lot, and there's, like you say, we need to start talking more about this.
We do. And if you want to book, you know, some sort of, we can come in and we can do parenting sessions. We're going to be partnering with Westchester Library. So look us up. We're going to be doing some stuff on healthy relationships, talking to your teen about relationships. So, you know, there are a lot of upbeat things. We'll be bringing in our sources of strength, you know, because we work on both ends of it, you know, the red flags, but also what do you do? What can you do? You know, how do you provide hope, help, and strength?
Right. Okay. Denise, one more time, can you give your phone number? Just.
Yes. 219-464-2128.
Great.
That's our advocacy line.
Okay. All right. Great. So number one, I would say first step for women or anyone in this situation is, you know, find a support group, you know, find your circle of support. And it's great that you were there to help those people. So, all right.
Working hard. I have a fantastic staff, fantastic board, you know, wonderful volunteers. If you want to volunteer, give us a call as well. We take hotline volunteers. The more volunteers we have, the more we can provide as far as groups and counseling and all of those things.
That's excellent. All right, great. Well, thank you again, Denise. It's just been wonderful talking with you.
You
And
too, Deb. Thank you.
let's see if we can do something about this, huh?
We're fighting the good fight.
We are. All right. Thanks again.
Take care.